By the winter of 1887, the coast had become a graveyard of snow. Flat roofs across the village cracked under the weight, caving in on the families beneath. But on the same street, Thomas Reed's cottage stood untouched. His roof, an overturned fishing boat, shed the snow as if it were nothing. Inside, the fire crackled, and Thomas's wife Sarah stirred a pot of stew. The storm that killed others only made their home feel warmer. But 5 months earlier, no one would have believed it. The whole village gathered to watch Thomas Reed drag his condemned boat through the street.
Reed, that old tub won't catch you any fish on dry land.
They're never going to let us live this down. Thomas, people are calling our home a shipwreck.
Sarah, I've seen that hull ride 20-foot waves. A little snow won't touch it.
By week's end, the hull was seated on stone walls, tarred and sealed. Thomas stood beneath it, daring the weather to come.
Dead boat for a roof. Might as well sleep in a coffin. Reed.
But before the jeering, before the hull ever touched those stone walls, Thomas Reed had only a condemned boat and a roof that couldn't survive another winter.
She's been in the family 3 generations. Now she's no more good for water, but her beam is still true. Wide enough, thick enough.
Inside the cottage, the ceiling dripped brown water into pails. The beams had begun to creak even on dry days.
A new roof would cost more than we'd see in 2 seasons, Thomas. What are we going to do?
That night, at the kitchen table, Thomas spread out a rough drawing. It showed the hull upside down, spanning the stone walls.
We flip her over. The hull becomes the roof. Tar and pitch seal it tight. Snow won't sit. It'll slide right off like it did on the sea.
He means it. He means to capsize our only boat and call it a roof. The village will never stop laughing, Thomas. Frank Hemlock will say we've gone mad.
Let them laugh, Sarah. I'd rather have a roof that holds than a pride that leaves us in the snow.
A week after the roof was done, the laughter quieted, but the contempt remained. Thomas walked the village street, and men turned their backs.
I've seen better roofs on a herring barrel. First good blow, that wreck will split like kindling.
Everyone's waiting for it to fall. Even I catch myself looking up at the ceiling.
Thomas stood on the curved hull, pressing his palm flat against the tarred seams, searching for the slightest give.
Tight and sound, just like she was on the water.
Thomas, you've been up there all afternoon. Come in and eat.
In a minute. The wind's shifting. I want to feel how the hull takes it.
By evening, the sky bruised purple over the sea. The air went still, the way it does before a hard rain.
If this roof fails, there's no money left, no boat, no home.
A storm was gathering out at sea. By dawn, the whole village would have its answer. The storm hit before dawn, a hard coastal rain that turned the streets to mud. Inside, Sarah woke to the sound of water sheeting off the hull, not dripping inside.
Thomas, wake up. It's been pouring for hours, and the ceiling is bone dry.
Knew it would. Pitch and curve, rain can't sit.
Thomas stepped into the downpour, watched the water cascade off the black hull like a river over stone.
Not a single drop, not one.
At the tavern, Frank Hemlock found other words.
A dead boat sheds rain. So does a rotting plank. Wait for real weather, then we'll see.
Sarah passed the tavern window, her hand lighter on the latch than it had been in weeks. The roof had held against the heaviest September rain in years, but Thomas knew the real test hadn't come yet. Autumn gold spread across the coast, and the village forecast board promised a mild winter. The old men nodded.
My workshop roof has stood 40 years. A mild season won't trouble it any.
But Thomas had seen winters that fooled the forecast. The memory of the ice storm of '82 never left him.
They said mild then, too. 6 men froze in their beds.
Evenings after the docks, he climbed onto the hull and worked fresh pitch into every seam.
Thomas, you've been up there every night. The forecast said mild.
Forecast won't matter if the wind shifts wrong. A curved roof only helps if the seams hold.
In the village, Frank Hemlock dismissed the whole matter, boasting his flat roof was the pride of the coast.
He's not telling me everything. This isn't about the roof.
Thomas tightened the last seam, listening to the calm wind. The village slumbered in false certainty, but he felt the edge of something darker. November brought the first snowfall. Light flakes dusted the village, but on the boat roof, they didn't stick.
It just slides off, like water off an oiled slicker. Thomas was right. Thomas, look. It's working. The snow won't stay at all.
I see it. But watch the other roofs. They're holding every flake.
By midday, the village roofs wore a white coat. Thomas's hull stayed bare black, a scar against the settling snow.
An inch of powder means nothing. Wait for 2 feet of snow. Then we'll see which roof holds.
2 feet on a flat roof stays and loads. That's when the trouble begins.
Thomas watched Frank's workshop roof. Even in light snow, it packed thick against the eaves, and he marked the tension in the beams.
I'd worry more about rot under that old tar than a little frost.
It's not today's dusting I'm watching. It's the weight that's already piling on Hemlock's workshop.
2 days later, the forecast board was torn down. A northeaster had been sighted, bigger than any in living memory. The village lurched into action. Men ran for lumber and nails, while women hauled dried fish and fuel inside.
A few extra braces never hurt, but my roof has seen worse than this. Not like Reed's upside-down tub. That thing'll catch the wind like a sail.
At the cottage, Thomas stood on a ladder, working hot pitch into the last cold seam along the hull's ridge.
I've got 3 weeks of fuel and all the dried cod we saved.
Good. Once this seam sets, nothing's getting through this hull.
The wind began to moan through the eaves. Outside, the last light bled from the sky like a wound.
It's just a blow. Same as every winter. My workshop will be standing when Reed's boat is kindling.
Thomas lowered himself from the ladder and drew Sarah close. The storm was only hours away. The blizzard struck at midnight, swallowing the village in white. Snow drove sideways, and the wind screamed through every crack. On Thomas's roof, the snow never rested. It slid off the curved hull in thick slabs, piling high against the walls but leaving the tarred wood bare.
Not a creak. Not a groan. The roof doesn't fight the snow. It just lets it slide.
We're safe, Sarah. This hull was built to shed water, and it's doing the same to the snow.
In Frank Hemlock's workshop, a deep crack split the ceiling beam. Sawdust sifted down like dry snow.
That beam has held 40 winters. It's just settling.
Then, a crash that cut through the wind. Widow Crane's cottage roof gave way, burying half the house under snow and timber.
Thomas, did you hear that? That was a roof coming down. People are going to die.
We can't risk the door, Sarah. The cold will kill us before we find anyone. We pray the hull holds, and we wait.
And the hull held. While other roofs split like dry kindling, Thomas's boat shed the snow as if it were still riding the sea. Frank Hemlock's workshop roof gave way with a sound like bones breaking. The flat span could no longer bear the weight.
Get out. The whole thing's going.
Frank dragged his wife through the snow, the wreck of his life's work buried behind them. Ahead, a faint amber glow cut the storm.
Reed's boat. It's the only roof still whole.
They pushed through drifts up to their chests, each step a battle. The curved black hull loomed out of the white, still clean.
Reed. Open the door, please. We've got nowhere else.
His frozen knuckles beat against the door. Inside, the knock echoed through the warm, still air.
That's Frank Hemlock. He mocked us. He said we'd die in this wreck.
He turned the whole village against us. But out there, he's just a man freezing.
The blizzard screamed. The knocking grew weaker, and Thomas Reed stood at the door, his hand on the latch, the choice burning in his chest. Thomas opened the door. The blizzard burst in like a white-capped wave, stealing breath from the room and whipping the fire into a frenzy.
Reed, my workshop is gone. The roof split. My wife can't last much longer in this. Please.
He's swallowing his pride. That must burn more deeply than the cold on his face.
Get inside, both of you, now.
He stepped aside, and the wind shoved them inward, snow swirling across the threshold and melting on the warm floor. Frank's wife stumbled toward the fire, but Frank himself stood frozen just inside the doorway, his eyes fixed on the curved hull ceiling.
Dry as bone. Not a crack. I laughed at this hull. I called it a coffin.
Sit by the stove, Mrs. Hemlock. I've broth warm. There's blankets.
Thomas latched the door and returned to his chair, watching the old boatwright in silence. The only sound was the storm. The storm howled on, but inside the upturned hull, the air was still and close. The enemy was now a guest, and the roof held them all. Sarah pressed a warm mug into the old woman's hands and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders.
You are safe. Drink slowly. The fire will chase the cold out.
The old woman clutched Sarah's hand, her eyes brimming with gratitude. Frank hadn't moved from the doorway, his eyes tracing the hull's ribs like a foreign text.
Not a sag. Not a split. I called it luck. I was the fool.
Thomas fed a log into the stove, keeping his back to the room. Firelight carved lines across his shoulders.
They're too stubborn to speak. I feel the words piling up like snow on a flat roof.
Frank stepped forward and sat beside his wife, never meeting Thomas's eyes. Thomas pulled another log, held it a moment, then set it in the stove without a word. Outside, the blizzard screamed. Inside, only the crackle of pine and the breathing of 4 souls broke the silence. The hours crawled. The blizzard shook the stone walls, but the hull held steady, shedding each fresh layer of snow. In the distance, another roof groaned and gave way with a muffled thunder that everyone pretended not to hear. Frank's wife buried her face in her hands and wept softly, the sound of a lifetime stripped in one night.
I hated him for what he said, but I can't hate them for losing what we almost lost.
Near dawn, with the storm still howling, Frank finally looked up. His face was cracked like old varnish.
I was wrong, Reed. This old boat, it's held. My whole workshop came down like a barrel of kindling.
He's been building roofs for 40 years. That admission just cost him more than his workshop. It's not the boat, Frank. It's the shape. Snow can't settle on a curve.
Frank nodded slowly, the truth settling into him like a tide. The boatwright had become the student. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but the first thaw had already begun inside that upturned hull.
How's it rigged, Reed? How's a dead boat better than any roof I ever built?
The pitch seals every seam like caulking on a ship, and the curve. Snow and rain can't sit. They slide before they load.
But the weight. A flat roof spreads it. A curve concentrates it at the edges. You are counting on the walls alone.
I set the hull on stone, not timber. The weight goes straight down into the walls. The ribs just keep the shape.
Frank traced the curve with his eyes, his boatwright's mind dismantling the logic piece by piece.
He's right. It's not luck. It's shipbuilding on land. I spent 40 years missing it.
Sarah watched from the corner, a quiet smile touching her lips as she stirred the broth.
I spent 40 years building roofs the same way, never once thought to flip a boat.
Desperation finds what pride overlooks.
Outside, the blizzard began to ease, the wind losing its savage edge as the first gray light of dawn crept over the sea. The first pale light of dawn slipped through the frosted window, revealing the hull ceiling still shedding its final coat of snow.
Wait, grandmother's sea chest. She always kept her diary in there.
Sarah crossed the dim room, knelt by the weather-beaten trunk, and lifted out a small leather-bound diary.
Listen to this. It's from my grandmother's writing.
When the sea takes a boat, wise folk turn her hull for a roof. The curve sheds snow as it sheds water.
My God, Sarah, I didn't know. I just did what felt right.
It's not a desperate idea. It's a lost tradition. I mocked what my grandfather knew.
Frank's face lost its color. He stared at the page, then up at the hull ribs, his pride collapsing like his workshop roof.
Whole hamlets did this, Thomas. We didn't invent it. We remembered it.
Outside, the blizzard's roar softened to a whisper, as if the storm itself was listening. The silence that followed was thick with old ghosts. Frank Hemlock set down the diary and rubbed his eyes.
I heard stories of such roofs when I was a boy. My father called them sailors' yarns. I never believed.
I never heard the stories. The boat was just what I had. I only wanted to keep Sarah safe through winter.
He never boasted because there was nothing to boast about. It was just survival. Reed, the village needs to know this. We need to teach them. Every old hull in the yard could save a family.
If you are willing to speak for it, Frank, people will listen. They trust a boatwright they've known for years.
A thin, weary smile crossed Frank's face. The air between them lost its chill.
The storm's ending. Soon we can bring this to the village. This knowledge won't die again.
They clasped hands. The old boatwright and the fisherman, their animosity buried beneath the snow outside, and outside, the last gusts of the blizzard scattered, leaving a world reborn under a pale winter sun. Morning broke over a village buried to the eaves. The hush was so deep that every sound felt like a profanation. A ragged figure broke the silence, stumbling through the drifts. Frank's young apprentice, half frozen, beat his fists on the cottage door.
You survived. God be thanked. What news? The village. How many still stand?
The apprentice could barely speak. He gestured wildly, describing roofs that had snapped like twigs, families digging out of the wreckage.
So many. If they'd only had a curved roof, they'd be sitting here with us, not digging their children out of the snow.
Then we'll make it right. I'll tear my own shop apart for lumber, but first, every old hull in the yard. No more flat roofs.
We'll do it together, Frank. This knowledge won't just save mine. It'll save every family on this coast.
Sarah ladled the last of the stew into bowls, her hands steady. The apprentice ate like a man returned from the dead.
This hull saved more than the reeds. It saved my pride, my duty, my chance to make amends.
Outside, the pale winter sun climbed higher, burning the frost from the wreckage. The work could begin. Thomas lifted the latch, and the door swung open onto a world erased and remade. The snow was up to the windowsills, and the air tasted of silence. Frank stepped out beside him, shovel in hand. The village he'd known lay buried under a weight that had broken its back.
Not a single roof hole except reeds. That black curve made a liar of everything I believed.
Above them, the boat roof dripped gently in the sun, its tarred wood steaming. Smoke curled from the chimney, the only sign of life not buried. Sarah helped Frank's wife down the step, both wrapped in wool. The older woman's face was pale, but no longer frightened.
Mrs. Hemlock says Frank hasn't stopped muttering about hull curves since last night. He's already planning the first salvage.
Frank's wife nodded, her eyes wet. She pressed Sarah's hand and whispered something the wind carried away.
I'll clear the yard myself if I have to. Every hull we save is a roof that won't collapse next winter.
The village will see, Frank. They'll see and they'll believe. This isn't just my roof anymore.
And with that, they lifted their shovels and began to carve a path through the white toward the ruined houses and the living who needed them. By midday, the survivors had dragged themselves into the square, hollow-eyed and silent. Every face turned toward the only roof that still held the sky. The man who had called it a shipwreck stood frozen beside his collapsed workshop. The mockers averted their eyes.
Look at it. A dead boat, they said. My own workshop is splinters. Only one roof on this coast didn't crack under the weight, and it's that one. Thomas Reed found the old way. The way our grandfathers used, and we laughed. But the snow didn't laugh. It showed us the truth.
Thomas stood at Frank's side, saying nothing. The silence of a man who had learned that vindication didn't need words. From the hushed crowd, old Marta Harris, whose family had fished these waters for a century, stepped forward. Her voice, thin as winter light, carried across the silence.
It's not my roof, Frank. It's theirs, the ones who came before. I just remembered.
Then we'll teach every family on this coast how to remember it. No more flat roofs.
The crowd broke into murmurs, not of mockery but of wonder. The broken village had found its first stitch of healing. Within days, the boatyard became the heart of the village. Men dragged old hulls from the mud, scraping off barnacles for a higher purpose.
That one, the Starling. Her beam is 23 feet. She'll roof the widow's cottage by sunset.
Set the curve true, seal it with pitch, and let the snow do the rest. That's the whole secret.
Inside the cottage, Sarah sat with the old diary and a fresh ledger, her quill scratching across the page as she preserved the method.
Not just for our children, but for every family that faces a winter on this coast.
By the end of the first week, 3 new boat roofs arched against the sky, black and glossy, each one a promise.
40 years. I built them flat, and not one survived. These will outlast me, Thomas.
They'll outlast both of us, and that's the point. A good roof shouldn't need rebuilding every generation.
In the boatyard, a sign appeared, saved for roofs. Seagulls circled overhead, watching the old work become new. The village, once a graveyard of pride, was learning to look up again. A few weeks later, the village looked different. Smoke rose from 7 boat roofs, and the path to the square no longer felt like a walk of shame. Old Man Harris gathered the villagers and spoke of the lost tradition, blessing the new roofs as his father had once done. That evening, a small celebration broke out in the square. Lanterns were lit, and the smell of salted fish drifted on the cold air.
To Thomas Reed, who saw a roof where the rest of us saw an old tub. The coast owes him its safety.
I only remembered what the sea taught us. The boats were always ready. We just forgot to look up.
Frank laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that surprised even himself, and clapped Thomas on the shoulder. Sarah stood at the edge of the crowd watching her husband. The weight she'd carried all autumn was finally gone.
We'll mark this day every year. The day the village learned that a dead boat makes the best roof.
Later, when the lanterns had burned low, the 2 men sat on a bench outside the cottage. They raised their cups in silence. The mockery that had stung for months was now a distant memory, as buried as the wreckage beneath the snow. One evening, when the work was done and the village had grown quiet, Thomas and Sarah stood beneath the boat roof, watching the sunset bleed gold over the sea.
I knew it, Thomas. Even when they laughed, I knew you'd find a way.
I wasn't trying to prove anything, Sarah. I just needed to keep you safe. That was all.
Safe. That's why he climbed up there every night, in the dark, with the pitch. It was never about the roof.
The first stars pricked the cold sky, and the village below was a scatter of warm windows. 7 of them now sheltered by the hulls of old boats.
We're still standing, Sarah. After everything, we're still standing.
Because of you. Because you looked at a dead boat and saw a home.
He pulled her into his arms, and they stood there, 2 people who had survived the deadliest winter the coast had ever known.
He never once said he loved me in words, but I've never doubted it. Not once.
The curved hull arched above them like a promise kept. Not just against the weather, but against the disbelief that had tried to bury them. Late that night, Thomas stoked the fire one last time. Sarah had already drifted to sleep.
She held, through the worst winter in living memory, a boat for a roof held.
He gazed up at the curved hull, the black tar gleaming in the firelight. A quiet smile crossed his face, the smile of a man who had nothing left to prove. The oldest ways are sometimes the strongest. The sea had taught them how to live, and a dead boat. The Sarah May had given them shelter when the snow came to kill. Outside, snow slid softly from the hull, piling in gentle slopes against the walls. The village slept under 7 new boat roofs, each one a dark curve against the stars. No mockery remained, only the whisper of snow and the warmth of shelter. Thomas pulled a blanket over Sarah's shoulder, and the hull above them kept its silent watch